Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Imagine a year when almost all of Europe exploded, a year when kings fled their palaces and barricades filled the streets of Paris, Berlin, Vienna, and Milan. That year was 1848, often called the springtime of peoples. It was a continent-wide firestorm of revolution that, while ultimately failing in the short term, fundamentally changed the course of modern history. So what lit the fuse? Why did an entire continent rise up all at once? To understand 1848, we have to rewind to the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, after Napoleon's defeat. Europe's old royal families gathered at the Congress of Vienna and hit the reset button, but they reset it back to the old days. They restored conservative monarchies, believing kings ruled by divine right. Constitutions were torn up, political participation was reserved for a tiny elite, and censorship clamped down on any new or critical ideas. For about 30 years, Europe was peaceful on the surface, but underneath it was a political pressure cooker. Then the economy went into a nosedive. The 1840s were a decade of disaster. Poor harvests led to skyrocketing food prices. The potato blight, famous for causing the Great Famine in Ireland, also hit the continent, creating widespread hunger. In the rapidly growing cities, factories closed and unemployment soared. For industrial workers and peasants, life became a desperate struggle for survival. This economic hardship was the gasoline poured on the smoldering political fire, and into this mix came two explosive ideas, liberalism and nationalism. The growing educated middle-class doctors, lawyers, professors were steeped in the ideals of the French Revolution. They demanded constitutional governments, the rule of law, a free press, and basic civil liberties. They wanted a say in how they were governed. At the same time, the spirit of nationalism was sweeping across Europe. People who shared a common language, culture, and history began to see themselves as a nation. Germans and Italians, who were divided into dozens of small states, dreamed of a unified country. Hungarians, Czechs, and Poles, who were ruled by foreign empires, demanded independence and self-determination. These ideas were a direct challenge to the old multi-ethnic empires and the absolute power of kings. Repression, hunger, and powerful new ideas, the stage was set for revolution. All it needed was a spark, and that spark, as it so often did, came from Paris. In February 1848, the people of Paris rose up against their monarch, King Louis Philippe. After days of street fighting, the king abdicated and fled to England. The Second French Republic was declared, and with it came radical changes: universal male suffrage, the right for all adult men to vote, and an end to press censorship. The news from Paris electrified Europe. If the French could overthrow their king, why couldn't they? The message was clear: the time for change was now. Within weeks, the revolutionary fever spread like wildfire. In the German states, crowds surged into the streets demanding German unification, constitutional rule, and civil liberties. The movement was so powerful that leaders from across Germany convened the Frankfurt Parliament. Their goal was monumental: to write a constitution for a unified, liberal Germany. It was an incredible moment, a parliament of professors and lawyers trying to build a nation from scratch. But they had a fatal flaw: they had no army. When they finally offered the crown of a unified Germany to the King of Prussia, he contemptuously refused it, saying he wouldn't accept the crown from the gutter. The parliament fell apart, and the dream of a united Germany was postponed. But the idea had been planted, laying the groundwork for the unification that would eventually happen in 1871. The most violent and complex revolts took place in the vast Austrian Empire, a patchwork of different nationalities. In Vienna, students and workers rose up, forcing the emperor to flee his own capital. But the real story was the explosion of nationalism. The Hungarians, led by the charismatic Lajos Kossuth, demanded autonomy and their own government. The Czechs in Prague and the Italians in Lombardy and Venetia also revolted against Austrian rule. For a moment, it looked like the ancient Habsburg Empire would shatter into a dozen pieces. One of the revolution's most significant achievements here was the abolition of serfdom, freeing millions of peasants. However, the empire's greatest strength was its army, which remained loyal, with ruthless efficiency, and often playing one nationalist group against another. The imperial forces crushed each rebellion one by one. The empire survived, but the ghost of nationalism would haunt it until its final collapse in 1918. Meanwhile, the Italian peninsula was also in turmoil. The goal was twofold: kick out the Austrians who controlled the north, and unite the fragmented Italian states into a single nation. Revolutions erupted from Sicily to Milan. The dream of an Italian risorgimento or resurgence seemed within reach, but like in Germany, the revolutionaries were divided and militarily weak. The Austrian army eventually regrouped and crushed the Italian forces. The old rulers were restored, yet the flame of Italian nationalism was not extinguished. It was fanned. The failures of 1848 taught Italian patriots that they needed stronger leadership and military power, lessons that would lead directly to Italian unification just over a decade later. Elsewhere, in Poland, Romania, and other parts of Central and Eastern Europe, national groups also rose up, demanding rights and recognition. Though their efforts were often hampered by ethnic divisions and crushed by the powerful empires. Despite the different locations, the revolutionaries of 1848 shared a core set of demands. Across the continent, they called for democracy, specifically the right to vote. They demanded freedom of the press and freedom of assembly, so they could speak, write, and gather without fear. They wanted written constitutions to limit the power of monarchs and guarantee citizens' rights. They fought for national self-determination, the idea that people should govern themselves, and they wanted an end to the old feudal system, with all its privileges for the aristocracy. These were not just minor reforms. They were a direct assault on the entire political and social order of Old World Europe. So, with so much passion and so many people involved, why did nearly all these revolutions fail in the short term? First, the revolutionaries themselves were deeply divided. Liberals from the middle class often got scared by the more radical demands of workers, who wanted social reforms like the right to a job. Once the middle class got their constitutions, they often abandoned the workers on the barricades. Furthermore, the nationalist groups often competed with each other instead of uniting against the empires. Hungarians fought for their freedom but were unwilling to grant it to the Croats or Slovaks within their own borders. Second, the revolutions lacked organization and leadership. They were spontaneous and widespread, but they had no unified command structure and, crucially, no armies of their own. Passion and street barricades were no match for the professional, disciplined armies that remained loyal to the kings and emperors. Third, the monarchs recovered their nerve. After the initial shock, they realized their militaries were still in control. With support from conservative elites and foreign powers, like Russia, which helped crush the Hungarian revolt, they launched a counter-revolution and methodically dismantled the revolutionary gains. By 1849, the old order seemed to be back in charge, but to call 1848 a total failure is to miss the point entirely. Its long-term achievements were profound. First, it marked the final death of feudalism in Central Europe. The abolition of serfdom was a permanent change that transformed rural society. Second, it made absolute monarchy untenable. Even though the monarchs returned to power, they couldn't rule as they had before. They were forced to grant constitutions, however limited, and acknowledged that they couldn't govern without some form of public consent. The age of divine right was over. Third, and perhaps most importantly, 1848 supercharged the forces of nationalism. The dreams of German and Italian unification, though defeated on the battlefield, became unstoppable political movements. The national aspirations of Hungarians, Czechs, and others became central issues that would dominate European politics for the next 70 years. Finally, 1848 saw the birth of mass politics. For the first time, workers and the urban poor entered the political stage as a force to be reckoned with. It is no coincidence that Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels published the Communist Manifesto in 1848. The year marked the beginning of socialism as a major political ideology. So why does a series of failed revolutions from over 170 years ago still matter today? Because the demands of 1848 are the foundations of modern democratic society. The fight for democracy, for a free press, for national self-determination, these are the struggles that continue to shape our world. The revolutions of May 1848 have failed to topple the thrones, but they succeeded in overthrowing the idea that thrones could rule without the consent of the governed. They were the moment when the ideals of the future clashed with the powers of the past, and even in defeat, they ensured that the future would win. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the springtime of peoples interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. See you next time.